I already know that a video on how our honey processing equipment works is not going to be the most watched video on our channel, but we've had a lot of comments and a lot of questions from both viewers and customers and other beekeepers on how some of the equipment we have works. So I'm really doing this video in response to that. When you walk into our retail store, there's 2 plate glass windows on this wall that you can look through into the bottling room. Customers really seem to like to do that. It's a nice touch in here, and I'm glad we did it. We'll go into this other room and take a look at how everything works. Looks like they're going to run some pints here today. We have one person just keeping the feed table full of jars, and once things get going, the machine pretty much takes care of itself. We don't pour at a breakneck pace. There's a couple bottlenecks in this system that keep us from going faster. One is that we do not pour the honey real hot. We can't force it through this system quickly because we're only bottling at 95 degrees. And the other is putting the caps on. The person putting the caps on can only keep up with so many jars passing by. This is the lid tightener. It gets them as tight as you want. It has a series of clutches on wheels in there, and a belt grips the jar, and the wheels turn the lids and twist them on tight. It has a clutching device that you can set for the tension. This wheel right here is meant to space the jars out evenly so they pass through the label machine at the correct distance apart. We don't want them all going through there back to back. It messes the label machine up. Of course, this label machine is capable of going much faster than this. This is just the pace we have it set for right now for these containers. This right here is our inkjet sprayer that sprays the lock code on the jars. This is the sensor telling you when the jar is going by. This is the base for our lock code sprayer. This is where we put in the code. It's pretty easy to use. We've been very happy with this brand that we purchased. It's been trouble-free. We just have to do maintenance once a year on it. We purchased this from Delta Packaging in Atlanta. This is Jesse labeling bears. These bears won't go through our big labeling machine that only labels round bottles. This too is a universal label product. It works pretty good. They go through thousands and thousands of bears a week. Thousands, yeah. How many bears a week we use them? How many bears a week do we go through?
We go through maybe 20 boxes of bears. There's what, 400 in a box?
So 8,000?
Yeah.
That's a lot of bears. We use these two filters for filtering the honey that comes out of the warming room before it passes over into the processing room tanks. We use a pretty big micron mesh bag in these. We're not trying to catch the small particles passing through. We're just trying to catch big debris, stuff that could potentially be offensive in a jar of honey. The warming room is right through that door. We have 28 drums of honey in that room right now. They're just warming up so we can pump them over into the tanks in the processing room. We'll probably do that tomorrow or the next day. It takes a couple days to warm it up. This is the filter bag that goes in those big filters. As you can see, it's a pretty big mesh. It's an 800 micron filter. You can read a newspaper through this stuff. Again, we're not trying to get out small particles like pollen and beeswax. We're just trying to make sure that large foreign debris can't get through our system and potentially get into any of our jars. There's 7 tanks in this room. 2 of them hold 300 gallons each, and the other 5 hold 600 gallons each. So there's a pretty good capacity in here. And we burn through it pretty fast. It doesn't sit there very long once it gets pumped into the tanks. Each tank has an array of valves. One goes into the common manifold that feeds the automatic bottling machine. The valve in the middle is simply for filling drums or buckets, and then the one on the right is hooked up to a quick coupler that we can hook up our semi-automatic machines like our Dadant Fillmaster. Each tank also has a sight tube so you can see how full it is. This tank is actually full right now. You can see the level at the top. Each tank is warmed by a hot water system. We bottle at 95 degrees. That thermometer there at the bottom lets us know what the temperature of the honey is in the tank. We're pretty particular about our temperature. We don't want it to get too warm. This manifold system has warm water running through it. It's a jacketed system. It keeps the honey at a constant temperature when it's being pumped to the reservoir on the automatic bottling machine. We want the honey to always be the same temperature. It has its own hot water heater. It's a dedicated, on-demand, industrial hot water heater. Runs the manifold and the reservoir for the automatic bottler. This is the pump that pumps honey from the manifold that's coming from the tanks into the reservoir that feeds the automatic bottling machine. These small filters just ahead of the reservoir for the automatic bottling machine use the same type of filter material that we use in the big filters in the other room. Again, we're not trying to have honey that can be labeled U.S. Grade A fancy. That's not what we're about. We're simply trying to make sure that large offensive debris can't get to our jars of honey. This is the back side of the pouring machine. That's the reservoir I've been mentioning. It's double jacketed. It's meant to ensure that all the honey entering the machine is always at the constant temperature that we've chosen, in this case 95 degrees. The pouring machine has 4 individual pumps. Each one pumps its own line. They're all adjustable. We can calibrate them all to be equal when the bottles are going by. These tanks have a water bath bottom. You can see the weld right here between the tank and the tank above and the water below. They're not double jacketed. My brother-in-law builds these tanks for me. He has a large shop in Gardena, California, And one of his jobs in the past was building tanks for a large soup kitchen in LA. And they don't use double jacketed tanks. They use tanks like this. And he says it keeps the soup as hot as they want it. So I went with his recommendation and did this, and it works great. Of course, we're only trying to keep the honey 95 degrees, but I'm convinced if you turn the hot water heater up hot enough, you could have that honey as hot as you want. Every tank has its own thermostat, and when that thermostat clicks on, it turns on a circulating pump, which circulates warm water through the water bath in the bottom until the temperature of the honey comes up, and then it shuts off. This is the on-demand hot water heater that we use that runs the whole system. It's not on right now. I don't see any numbers on it. It's usually on because one of the tanks is demanding warm water. Apparently all 7 tanks right now are up to temperature, or it would be on. When this hot water heater clicks on, it circulates hot water into the upper part of this manifold. That's where all the individual pumps for every tank pull water. And they all have a return line that goes into the bottom part of this manifold, and that's the water that the hot water heater continuously circulates. There's actually 9 pumps here because there's 2 tanks next door in the extracting room, and this heats them too. This system is an open system. In other words, there's no pressure on the system. We actually use this small honey tank as a water reservoir. The level of the water in it is about halfway up. It's just above the level of the water in all the tanks. And we very rarely have to add water. There's no place for the water to go. It just has to stay in the system. I got the idea for using a hot water heater for warming honey tanks from a friend of mine down in South Georgia. He has an array of large holding tanks, and he has piping running through all the tanks on the inside, and they're all hooked up to a circulating pump with the hot water heater, and he heats the honey tanks from the inside with the piping. It works pretty good for him. He's not trying to get it real hot. He just wants the honey to be warm enough so he can get it settled quickly and pumped into 55-gallon drums. This system works really good here. We have no problem keeping these tanks to temperature. Of course, again, we're not trying to get them up to 140 or 160 degrees either. So it's worked well.